Hello, and welcome to Wizardry. So I've had this Reaper Minotaur of the Maze Mini for quite some time, and had every intention of painting it all up with my Reaper paints. Then, Joe at Nightmare Landscapes sent me a new batch of paints, and well, you'll see. My initial idea for the skin was a very dark skin, and I started with a base of dark purple, a mix of Nightmare Red, blue, and black. On top of that, dark skin tone. I pictured the Minotaur deep within the labyrinth, bathed in shadow, searching the corridors for the unlucky souls trapped within this beast's lair. The original paint scheme was to leave a lot of the deep purple base coat showing, then build my skin tones from the dark to the highest highlights and glaze back down. I began painting the fur in the same manner, with the thought that I would work up to an extreme highlight and glaze back down to a dark, shadowy appearance. But as I layered up my skin tones, I got to thinking that my video dweller was a subterranean setting. So I devised a different plan. But now, this paint scheme wouldn't work, and I had highlighted myself into muscle islands that would look terrible with my new paint scheme. So, I filled the gaps between the muscles with my mid-tone and highlight, and then glazed in the shadows. It ended up being a lot of extra work to end up where I did, but I felt better not repeating an underground diorama so soon after Dweller had been completed. And I guess it helps show that it's just paint, and there is a solution to most problems without stripping and starting over. Even with the change in direction on my paint scheme, and a bit of a struggle with the weapons, I really did enjoy finally getting paint on this model. And I particularly enjoyed using Nightmare Landscapes paints to do it, especially the flesh tones. I really enjoy using those. But now, a new dilemma loomed ahead of me. I had no base or plinth to put this guy on. I have a good variety of wood and other materials to construct plinths and bases with out in my garage, but I thought this would be the perfect time to demonstrate resourcefulness and improvisation. So I settled on this lid from a peanut butter jar as my base, but I would need a way to disguise what it really was. So I used my texture roller from Nightmare Landscapes to lay down my pattern, then turned it 90 degrees and did it again. This styrofoam was too thick, but these were just the right thickness for what I needed to do. And this thicker foam would work well as the top of the base. With my foam disguise pieces cut, it was just a matter of a little super glue to slap the base together. Having brush-on super glue, thin and gel on hand when doing any projects is very helpful. Each excels in a different area, and quite often I'll use them in combination. After scuffing the surface for better adhesion, I spread the thin super glue out evenly before pressing the foam into place. Now that I had the bare bones of my base, it was time to break out the XPS foam to create some large stone slabs and some smaller boulders. I had the basic configuration in my head, so it was really just a matter of shaping and fitting them together. If you're like me and you don't have a handheld wire foam cutter or a Proxon table, oh boy would I like one of those. The careful use of a sharp fillet knife works great. If you can fillet a fish, you can fillet a foam. Bending and twisting to create cracks or scarring with an X-Acto knife are a couple good ways to create depth and add character to your stones. Randomly ripping off chunks works as well. Sanding blocks, like this one, sandpaper, or files, work very effectively for shaping and texturing at the same time. When making a diorama, always remember variety. In nature, you'll not find several large stones all alone. Most likely, there are going to be some smaller stones, on down to rocks and even sand. The more details you can add, the more of a story you can tell when writing or building dioramas. It helps describe the scene to the viewer, and it helps the model fit cohesively into this snapshot in time that you are creating. We have several birds of prey in our area where we live. Eagles, hawks, owls, falcons. I've even seen a couple of osprey. So from time to time, I find a rodent skull or two in our backyard. And this one will now have a co-starring role in a fantasy diorama. Now, unfortunately, some idiot forgot to hit the record button when I was using some Nightmare Landscapes basing materials to finish this off. So, here we go, off to the primed base. You'll notice the foam is very pitted. People will tell you you can't spray paint XPS foam, but you can if you know what you're doing and if you're careful. I was careful here, but I sprayed from a close distance so that the propellants and the solvents would pit the foam for an added texture. Next came out the craft paints to lay down a base coat and shadows. When priming this base, I realized I was out of white primer, leaving me to start with this gray base. For the most part, I stippled on the shades and the highlights, giving it depth and a porous appearance. After letting the craft paint do the coverage of the primer, out came the Nightmare Landscapes paint to punch it up a bit. The skull needed some foliage growing around it to tie it into the landscape. For added color and texture, I broke out my Nightmare Landscapes rough ground texture paint. I felt some subtle colors and shadows were in order, so I broke out my Nightmare Landscapes washes and got to work. I needed to give some attention to my improvised base. And with that, my adventure into the world of the Minotaur was over. I'm undecided on whether I like the display base or not. I know I could put more work into it and make it pop more, but do I want to? Let me know what you think in the comments. Please share, like, and subscribe. That free subscription helps me out way more than you know. Thanks to Joe at Nightmare Landscapes. Thanks to you for watching. And until next time, I'm Wes, and this is Wizardry.